Hello everyone, this is Altarox, and I'm back with another scenario. This scenario will be, what if Carthage won the Second Punic War Part 2, because I don't have original ideas that I actually dedicate myself towards. So, yeah, after this, I don't know what's coming out. Probably another one of the what if FDR was assassinated, and possibly I have some scripts that are like halfway done, so I don't know if I'll finish those, but I will get something out soon. So let's start. This is the sequel to the last to the first video, so watch that if you haven't, because I don't have the skills. I'm too lazy to do a quick summary. But so it starts. So the last one ended in, I believe, 107 BC. So let's pick it up. 106 BC, where Iode, king of the Celts, would launch his assault on Rome. He would meet multiple Roman legions and defeat them, laying siege to Rome itself in December. Actually, not in December, in January of 105 BC. Apologize. Romulus Verres, who is the Populodux of Rome, would send an envoy to their old enemy of Carthago Novo, along with some of their allies like Dacia and basically just Dacia, because most of the tribes they were allied to have been subjugated by the Celts. Hannibal, who this isn't Hannibal Barca, well technically it's like Hannibal Barca III, because I'm not good at naming people, would accept the invitation and attack southern Gaul. In 104 BC, Rome would sadly fall, but the Senate, with the help of the 11th and 5th legions, led by Romulus Verres, would retreat to Ostia, which was Rome's port city, where they would set up makeshift defenses as the Senate flees to Sardinia. Carthage, which, as you remember, is now just reduced to a city-state, as they're different from Carthago Novo. They're different things now. And the Republic of Kyrnos, which is Corsica, would join the war. And an army led by Didomir, Queen of Carthage, her cousin, Hamil, would land in Sicily to support the 3rd Legion, which would be stationed there. Rome would manage to defeat a Celtic army in central Italy in what I call the Battle of the Appian Way. Even though the Appian Way is super long and it would only happen along a stretch of it, I'm not good at naming things. The Dacians would also be fighting the Celts in Pannonia, which is modern-day Hungary, to a stalemate in 104 BC. Hannibal, back to him, he would push eastward, and he would have a general. Because a lot of this, I try to be plausible, but I also try to tell a good story, so that's why I do all these names and like very detailed wars and stuff. So his general is Xiphares, who is a Macedonian mercenary general, similar to how in the First Punic War the Carthaginians had a Greek. I don't know if he was Macedonian, but I know he's Greek. A Greek general fighting on their side, who's a mercenary. So this is sort of a callback to that. So yeah, Xiphares would lay siege to Massilia, which was captured by the Celts. Hannibal would then move northward, and would only be stopped when Iode himself, who had been laying siege to Ostia, would have come back and taken command of an army to defeat Hannibal. The siege of Ostia would continue as the city would be completely surrounded. The 2nd Legion would move to Samnium in eastern Italy. They were the one blocking like the Appian Way, because they'd have to fight a revolt. Because I remember in this timeline, a lot of the subjugated Italian groups are much stronger and more revolutionary. This would allow Celtic troops to cross the Appian Way and take Apulia, which is southeastern Italy, where Brundisium, Tarentum, all those great Roman cities were. Another Celtic army, led by Aod's adopted son, Haida. Also, names, I suck at them, so I either just Google random Celtic names for, like, the Celts, or I just do something that sounds like it would work, because I'm really bad at this. Carthage, it's worse. I just reuse same names. So yeah, Haida marches south and razes Capua, which is a city, and lays siege to Rhegium, which is in southern Italy. The 3rd Legion in the army of Carthage helped to relieve the defenders of Rhegium and push the Celts out of the city. By 102 BC, Ostia is still holding, and reinforcements and supplies from Carthago, Novo, Kyrnos, and Carthage enter the port. Xerxes moves eastward after taking Massilia into the Po Valley, which is in northern Italy. He takes back Genoa, Pisa, which is Pisa, and Placentia from the Celts. Hannibal, who had retreated to Barcelona the previous year, which he moves northward again, and his army duels with Aodes in the land of the Caderci. Legio II, so the 2nd Legion, squashes the Samnite rebellion and retakes the Appian Way, marching south to retake Brundisium. Legio III and the army of Carthage pushed back Haida, and finally managed to defeat him in the battles of Nicotera, Hipponium, Sciletium, and finally Cremisa, where the Carthago-Roman force surrounds Haida and pushes his army into the sea. Haida was killed by a stone thrown from a sling, and as Aod's youngest son, Dair, leads a Celtic force through Dacia, forcing the Dacians to only operate south of the Danube. The king of Numidia, Micipsa, leads an army into the outskirts of Carthage, laying siege to the city, as his general Narvas leads an invasion into Carthago-Novan Morocco. In 101 BC, the 3rd Legion and a Carthaginian army, the Carthaginian army that was accompanying them, moves northward and rendezvous with a small force of Carthago-Novoans and Kyrnosians, and as well as the newly created 10th Legion and 11th Legion. This force, which I will be referring to as the Conciliar Army due to the fact that it would have been run by 5 leaders, would march northward and attack the army sieging Ostia, which would be led by Aod's brother, as Aod was still in Gaul trying to fight off Hannibal's repeated assaults. The Conciliar Army, although smaller than their enemies, would temporarily surround the Celts, pushing them into the walls of Ostia. Then Romulus Verres and his army, although smaller than the enemies, Romulus Verres and his legions, which would be smaller than their enemy's force, as well as some militia from Ostia and their reinforcements that had been arriving. They would sally out from Ostia, sandwiching the Celtic army between these two forces. This battle, later referred to in Latin as Legatum ad Pugnam Romae, or the Battle for Rome's Legacy, was one of the most influential battles in history. At the end of the battle, over 100,000 men lay dead on the battlefield. Rome emerged victorious. The armies consolidated in the new Exotius Magnum, or Grand Army, would march into Rome. The Exertius Magnum then would move east and take Castrum Truentium, Ancona, and Aruminium. Once news of the Battle of Ostia arrived at Brundisium, 35% of the Celtic garrison deserted and the city fell within 2 months. The 2nd Legion then moved northward to join the Exertius Magnum. Aod would push Hannibal further south and defeat him at the Battle of Narbonica. Hannibal would barely escape, and because he suffered. Hannibal barely escapes, suffering 2 arrow wounds to the limbs and a gash on his side. His force goes down to Barcelona again, and he begins to raise as large of an army he can. He needs it to be strong, as he views it as it is the last hope of Carthago Novo. He realizes he has to sacrifice Mauritania, which is, if I didn't mention before, Mauritania at this time is Morocco, not the Mauritania in West Africa. It's like deep West Africa. It's the Maghreb. As he's no way of taking it back if he wants his own Excurtius Magnum to be fighting the Celts. Mauritania falls completely to Numidia, as the actual city of Carthage holds barely to the Numidian onslaught. Iota moves eastward with his force, and he meets Xiphiades as their armies clash. Xiphiades is trounced and is captured by Iota. In 100 BC, Micipsa dies in January, leading his kingdom to crumble. Numidia collapses into a handful of warlords vying for power, but the army sieging Carthage is left to his unlanded son Jugurtha. In February, the walls of Carthage are overrun, and Jugurtha's army enters the city. The 15-year-old Queen Didomir offers her hand in marriage to Jugurtha to make peace between the two powers. Jugurtha accepts, knowing it will bring stability to his new lands, becoming the legitimate king of Carthage. He chooses not to recall Carthaginian troops in Italy because he doesn't want to bring troops back that would be able to usurp him, as they're not loyal to him. The new Numido-Carthaginian force moves west and takes over the chiefdom of Zama, a Numidian splinter state in former Carthaginian lands. In Dacia, Dair manages to completely destroy the Dacian army. Hannibal, at this time, Hannibal is continuing to build up his own Exertius Magnum. The Exertius Magnum fights Aeod in the Battle of Mutina. The Roman forces are... This is a tactical victory for the Romans, although only slight, as they manage to push the Celts back and force them north towards Parma. As the armies engage at Parma in a small skirmish, which Rome wins, the Celts retreat north to Mediolanum, where the Romans meet them. The Romans are surrounded as the Celts win a Pyrrhic victory, as half the Roman army is killed, but the Celtic army's numbers is gutted by the Romans. The Excurtius Magnum takes refuge in Placentia for winter. Sorry, I'm trying to do proper Latin pronunciations, which there's no soft C's, so I just forget that sometimes. In 99 BC, Hannibal's new army is finally raised, and they head northeast as far as the land of the Haidui, while fighting off Celts. Hannibal then moves southwards towards Mediolanum, where he heard Iod's newly reinforced army was waiting. He also sends an envoy to Romulus Verres, informing him of his plans. Romulus, also reinforced by some more Roman soldiers, but not nearly as much as Aeod's army was reinforced, as much of the Roman manpower had been depleted, while the Celts hadn't. Moves his force northwards and meets Iod's greater force on the battlefield. The Romans are beaten and pushed back as Iod gives chase. They are backed into the city of Genua and are besieged in the port city. They stay there for 5 days before Hannibal finally arrives, and in a repeat of the Battle of Ostia, the Celts are forced against the walls of Genua as the Romans sally out and defeat them. Once news spread of Iod's death, his empire collapses, as the Romans and Carthago Novoans take a small amount of land and return to peace. What follows is a time of peace for the Mediterraneans outside of the Maghreb, where they're still fighting, and further in the eastern Mediterranean there's also some conflict. In the Celtic successor states, however, there's some fighting, but not to an extreme amount. So there are a few small wars between this time and an indefinite time, which just for the next long period haven't, not fully fleshed out and when the end date is. Iobeon, I can't pronounce that. It's who's the wife of Iode, leaves Belgae with her young son and an army. She crosses the English Channel into Kent. There, she leads her army northwards towards the land of the Iceni, or the Iceni. Her army conquers the Iceni, and she forms the kingdom of Celta Icenicum, or Celta Icenica. Over the next 30 years, Celta Icenica would conquer what we know as southern England and parts of southern Wales. The first from 91 BC to 88 BC, the First Asiatic War would occur. Macedonia, Cappadocia, and Pontus would fight the Seleucid Empire. The Macedonian armies would march through southern Anatolia and face successes against the Seleucids. The Armenians would revolt, and by 88 BC, the Seleucids would sign a peace giving southern and western Anatolia to Macedonia, freeing Armenia, and sending a large tribute and pact of non-aggression towards the Cappadocians and Pontus. This would begin the beginning of the end for the Seleucids, as they would start to lose land and power. In 87 BC, Hannibal III would die and be succeeded by his son Harsible, and that's just a made-up name. And in 84 BC, Lower Egypt, which was controlled by the Seleucids, would be conquered by Upper Egypt, which is further south, whose pharaoh, as remember, they weren't following the regular pantheon, but instead like a mixture of the pantheon and like the religion formed by Akhenaten, and he would restyle himself as Aten Ramses. In 80 BC, Romulus Verres would die at an old age and would appoint his grandson, Quintus Scipio Verres, to inherit the throne. Iodin, who had inherited Celta Icenica in 89 BC, exiles after a heated argument with his top generals. He exiles them, so those generals leave to help smaller Britannic tribes to establish small kingdoms in Britannica, allowing them to be more organized. In 76 BC, Jugurtha, the king of Carthage, would be killed while fighting off the armies of Syphax. Their son Lythertha, that's the name I just made up, inherits, although his mother Didomar retains the title Queen of Carthage. In 70 to 68 BC, the Carthaginovians would engage in their first war since the I don't know what I'm calling it, but the Great War with Iode, the Iodian conquests, in which they would attack Arvernicum, which was one of the Celtic successor states, and conquer parts of the southern parts, some of the south of that nation. In 67 BC, Didomar would be assassinated by her son Lythertha. So that is part 2 to this. Right now you are looking at the world map as of 67 BC. So yeah, there will be a part 3 to this sometime. Whenever I'm in doubt of a scenario idea, I'll probably just return to this, because I'll never get tired of this scenario. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I guess. Bye.